The snow fell heavy on the mountains of Calreth Prime, and Lyria could barely see 3 steps ahead of her. She was an elf from the distant planet of Silvergrove, and right now she was lost in the worst place possible. Her silver hair was frozen stiff, and her pointed ears ached from the bitter cold. Behind her 2 small dragons stumbled through the deep snow, making soft crying sounds that broke her heart. The little ones were only 6 weeks old, and they should have been safe in a warm nest with their mother. But their mother was gone now. 3 days ago, hunters had killed the great dragon for her scales, leaving these 2 babies orphaned and alone. Lyria had been tracking the hunters when she found the crying hatchlings huddled beside their mother's body. She could not leave them there to die, so she took them with her, even though she knew it would make her journey 10 times harder. Now the storm was getting worse, and night was falling fast. The temperature was dropping so low that even her thick travel cloak could not keep out the cold. The baby dragons, whom she had named Ember and Ash, were starting to slow down. Their small bodies were not strong enough yet to handle this kind of weather. Ember was the bolder of the 2, with bright red scales that usually gleamed like fire. Ash had darker scales that shimmered between blue and black, depending on the light. Right now, both of them looked dull and sick. Their eyes were half closed, and they stumbled more with each step. Lyria knew they would not survive another night in the open. She had to find shelter soon, or all 3 of them would freeze to death. Through the howling wind, she heard something that made her stop. It was a low humming sound like machinery. Her heart jumped with both hope and fear. Machinery meant people, and on this planet that meant humans. Every elf child grew up hearing stories about humans. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. According to the elders, humans were violent, unpredictable, and cruel. They started wars over the smallest things. They built weapons that could destroy entire worlds. They took what they wanted and showed no mercy to those who got in their way. Lyria had never met a human before, but she had been taught to avoid them at all costs. Yet what choice did she have now? The dragons would die without shelter, and she was too weak to build anything in this storm. She had no food left and no way to make fire. If humans were nearby, they were her only hope. She pushed forward toward the sound, and soon she saw lights glowing through the snow. A settlement sat between 2 mountain peaks. It was made of gray metal buildings with tall walls around it. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and she could see movement behind lit windows. This was a mining outpost, she realized. Humans came to frozen worlds like this to dig valuable minerals from the ground. They lived in these harsh places for months or even years at a time. The main gate was closed, but she could see 2 guards standing. Beside it, both of them wore thick coats and carried weapons. One was a tall woman with dark skin, and the other was a younger man with bright red hair. Lyria's hands shook as she approached. The dragons sensed her fear and pressed close to her legs, whimpering softly. When she was 20 steps from the gate, the guards noticed her. Both of them raised their weapons, and the woman shouted something Lyria could not understand over the wind. Lyria raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "Please," she called out, in the human language she had learned from books. Her accent was thick, and the words felt strange in her mouth. "I need help." The 2 guards looked at each other with surprise. Then they looked down and saw the baby dragons. The woman's eyes went wide, and she lowered her weapon slightly. The man kept his gun pointed at Lyria, but he looked uncertain. "What are those?" the woman asked. "Dragons," Lyria said. "Babies. Their mother is dead. They will die in the cold." The woman took a step closer. Her name tag read, Hayes, in bold letters. "Where did you come from?" Lyria gestured vaguely toward the mountains. "I was hunting poachers. I found these 2 alone. Please, I just need shelter for the night." The male guard, whose tag said Torres, shook his head. "Boss, we cannot bring wild animals into the outpost." Hayes shot him an angry look. "Those are not wild animals, Torres. Those are babies, and they are freezing." She turned back to Lyria. "And she is clearly not a threat. Look at her. She can barely stand." Torres still looked doubtful. "The director will not like this." "Then I will deal with the director," Hayes said firmly. She walked to the gate controls and pressed a button. The heavy metal gate began to slide open with a loud grinding noise. "Come on quickly," Hayes called to Lyria before. You turn into an ice statue. Lyria nearly cried with relief. She stumbled forward and the dragons followed, staying close to her. As soon as they were through the gate, haze closed it behind them. The wind immediately felt less harsh with the walls blocking. Some of the Stormtoras was talking into a radio calling for someone named Rivera. Hayes put a hand on Lyria's shoulder and gently guided her toward a nearby building. "You are safe now," she said. "We will get you warmed up." And fed. Lyria wanted to thank her, but she was shaking too hard to speak. The dragons made small chirping sounds as they entered the warm building. Inside, the outpost was bright and noisy. Miners in dirty work clothes stopped what they were doing to stare at the strange visitors. Some pointed at the dragons. Others whispered to each other. A few backed away nervously. Hayes ignored all of them and led Lyria down a hallway. They entered a room filled with medical equipment. A woman in a white coat looked up from a desk. Her name tag read, "Rivera." "This is our doctor," Hayes explained. "She will take care of you." Rivera stood up quickly when she saw Lyria's condition. "Holy stars," she muttered. "Sit down before you fall down." Lyria sank into a chair and the dragons immediately curled up at her feet. Rivera began examining her with quick, efficient movements. "Your hands and feet have frostbite," she said. "Not too serious, but we need to warm you slowly." She wrapped warm blankets around Lyria's shoulders. Hayes disappeared for a moment and came back carrying a tray. She had hot soup and bread along with chunks of raw meat. "The meat is for them," Hayes said. Nodding at the dragons, "I figured they do not eat vegetables." Lyria watched as Hayes set the meat on the floor. Ember and Ash looked up at her with big eyes, then they looked at Lyria as if asking permission. "It is okay," Lyria said softly. "You can eat." The dragons fell on the food like they had not eaten in days, which was true. They tore into the meat with their small, sharp teeth, making happy growling sounds. Hayes smiled as she watched them. "They are kind of cute," she admitted. Lyria sipped the hot soup and felt warmth spreading through her body. "Thank you," she whispered. Hayes sat down in a nearby chair. "You are welcome," she said. "But I have to ask, what is an elf doing all the way out here? And where did you really find those dragons?" Lyria took a deep breath. It was a long story, and she was not sure these humans would believe her. But they had saved her life. They deserved the truth. Lyria told Hayes and Rivera everything that had happened over the past 3 days. She explained how she had been tracking a group of poachers who were illegally hunting the great dragons of Calreth Prime. Dragon scales were worth a fortune on the black market because they could be used to make armor that was nearly indestructible. The poachers did not care that dragons were a protected species. They did not care that killing a mother dragon meant orphaning her young. They only cared about money. Lyria had been following their trail for 2 weeks when she found the kill site. The mother dragon was massive even in death. Her beautiful golden scales had been stripped away, leaving only bloody flesh behind. The poachers had taken what they wanted and left the rest to rot. That was when Lyria heard the crying. 2 small dragons were hiding in the rocks near their mother's body. They were terrified and alone. Ember had tried to be brave, hissing at Lyria when she approached, but Ash just cried and cried, with a sound that cut through Lyria's heart like a knife. She knew she should have left them there. Dragon hatchlings were dangerous even at that age. Their claws were sharp, and their bite could break bones. But when she looked into their eyes, she saw the same fear and pain she had felt when she lost her own mother years ago, so she made a choice. She would take them somewhere safe. The problem was that Calreth Prime was not a safe planet. It was a frozen wasteland with few settlements and even fewer people who cared about orphaned animals. Lyria had planned to take the dragons to the nearest wildlife sanctuary. But that was a 3-week journey on foot, and the weather turned bad almost immediately. The storm came out of nowhere, and soon she was lost in the blinding snow. She had been wandering for days when she finally stumbled upon the human outpost. Hayes listened to the whole story without interrupting. When Lyria finished, the human woman sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "That is quite a tale," she said. Rivera was checking on the dragons. She had brought a medical scanner and was waving it over their small bodies. "They are malnourished," she reported, "and they have some minor injuries, but nothing serious. With proper food and rest, They should recover quickly. Hayes nodded. Then we will make sure they get proper food and rest. Torres appeared in the doorway looking nervous. Boss, he said, Director Cole wants to talk to you. She heard about our visitors. Hayes stood up with a sigh. Of course. She did stay here, she told Lyria. I will handle this, after Hayes left. Rivera continued examining the dragons. She seemed genuinely interested in them rather than afraid. You know, she said to Lyria, I studied xenobiology before I became a field medic. I always wanted to see a Calreth dragon up close. She gently touched Ash's scales. They are beautiful. Lyria relaxed a little. Maybe not all humans were as bad as the stories said. These ones seemed kind. They had not hurt her or the dragons. Instead, they had offered help without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, in another part of the outpost, Hayes was having a very different conversation. Director Cole was a strict woman who ran the mining operation with an iron fist. She stood in her office with her arms crossed and her face showing clear disapproval. Explain to me, Hayes, she said coldly, why you brought unauthorized life forms into my facility. Hayes kept her voice calm and professional. They were dying in the storm, Director. The elf and the dragons would have frozen to death if we left them outside. Cole walked to her window and looked out at the snow. This is a mining outpost, not a rescue center. We have rules for a reason. Bringing in unknown creatures puts everyone here at risk. Those creatures are baby dragons, Hayes argued. They are scared and hungry. They are not a threat to anyone. How do you know that? Cole snapped. Have you ever dealt with dragons before? Do you know what they are capable of? Hayes hesitated. No, Director, but I know what we are capable of. We are humans, and we have always been survivors because we help each other, even when it is difficult, even when it is risky. Cole turned to face her. That is a nice speech, but it does not change the facts. Those animals are dangerous, and the elf is a stranger. We know nothing about her. She could be a spy or a criminal. Hayes shook her head. She is just someone who needed help, and we gave it to her. That is what decent people do. The two women stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Cole sighed. You have always been too soft, Hayes, but that is also why the crew respects you. She sat down at her desk. Fine, the elf and her dragons can stay for tonight, but tomorrow I want them gone. Understood. Hayes wanted to argue more, but she knew when to stop pushing. Understood. Director, thank you. Back in the medical bay, Lyria was starting to feel better. The warmth had returned to her fingers and toes, the soup had filled her empty stomach, and watching Ember and Ash play with a rolled-up piece of cloth made her smile. For the first time in days, Rivera had given the dragon some toys to keep them occupied. They pounced on the cloth ball, batting it back and forth between them. Their energy was returning quickly now that they had food and warmth. A few miners had gathered at the doorway to watch. They whispered to each other and pointed at the dragons. One of them, a young woman named Katie, came into the room. Can I pet them? She asked nervously. Lyria looked at the dragons. They are not pets, she said gently, but if you are careful and move slowly, they might let you touch them. Katie approached with her hand out. Ember sniffed her fingers, then allowed her to stroke his red scales. The dragon made a purring sound that surprised everyone. He likes you, Lyria said. Katie grinned. They are amazing. Where I come from, we only have pictures of dragons. I never thought I would see real ones. More miners started coming into the room. They all wanted to see the baby dragons. Rivera had to shoo some of them away to prevent the room from getting too crowded. Hayes returned looking tired. She pulled Lyria aside and spoke quietly. I talked to the director, she said. You can stay tonight, but she wants you gone tomorrow. Lyria's heart sank. I understand, she said. You have already done more than enough. Thank you for your kindness. Hayes looked frustrated. It is not right, she muttered. But orders are orders. That night, Lyria could not sleep. She lay on a cot in the medical bay with Ember and Ash curled up beside her. The dragons were warm and their breathing was steady. They were safe for now. But tomorrow she would have to take them back out into the cold. She did not know if they would survive another journey. The storm was still raging outside. She could hear the wind howling against the metal walls. Through a small window, she watched the snow fall in thick white sheets. Somewhere in the outpost, she heard laughter and music. The miners were relaxing after their shift. They seemed happy here despite the harsh conditions. Lyria thought about her own people. Back on Silver Grove, they would be shocked to learn that she had trusted humans. They would say she was foolish and reckless. But these humans had shown her more kindness in one day than many elves had shown her in years. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe humans were not all bad. Or maybe she had just been lucky to meet good ones. Either way, she was grateful. Morning came too quickly for Lyria. She woke to find Hayes standing beside her cot with a sad expression on her face. "The storm has not stopped," Hayes said quietly. "Director Cole says you still have to leave, but I convinced her to give you supplies." Lyria sat up carefully, trying not to wake the sleeping dragons. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have been very kind." Hayes handed her a backpack. "There is food, water, and thermal blankets inside. Also an emergency beacon. If you get into trouble, press the button and we will try to find you." Lyria took the pack with trembling hands. She knew this was more than Hayes was supposed to give her. The human woman was risking her job to help a stranger. "Why are you doing this?" Lyria asked. "Why help me when your director ordered?" Unata Hayes sat down on a nearby chair. "Because it is the right thing to do," she said simply. "My grandmother always told me that we are judged not by what we say, but by what we do when no one is watching." She looked at the sleeping dragons. "Those little ones deserve a chance at life. And so do you." Before Lyria could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the outpost. Red lights flashed on the walls, and a computerized voice began speaking. "Warning, main power failure, backup systems, engaging warning. Temperature control compromised." Hayes jumped to her feet. "Stay here," she ordered. Then she ran out of the room. Lyria heard shouting and running footsteps in the hallways. The lights flickered and went out, leaving only emergency lighting. Ember and Ash woke up with frightened chirps. They huddled close to Lyria, sensing that something was wrong. Through the window, Lyria could see that the storm had gotten much worse. The wind was so strong it shook the metal buildings. Snow piled up against the walls in huge drifts. This was a killing storm, the kind that could bury an entire settlement. Rivera rushed into the room carrying medical supplies. "We are evacuating to the central shelter," she said. "Come with me now." Lyria scooped up Ember while Ash followed close. Behind, they joined a crowd of miners moving through the corridors. Everyone looked scared. The cold was already seeping into the building. Lyria could see her breath forming white clouds in the air. The central shelter was a large reinforced room in the middle of the outpost. It had thick walls and its own air supply. Miners crowded inside, wrapping themselves in blankets. Hayes was there, along with Director Cole and several other leaders. Cole was speaking urgently into a radio. "How long until we get main power back?" she demanded. The voice on the radio crackled with static. "The generator is completely frozen, ma'am. We are trying to thaw it, but in this cold, it could take hours. Maybe longer." "Hours," Cole repeated. "We do not have hours. The backup batteries. We'll die in 90 minutes without power. We have no heat. This whole outpost will become a freezer." The room fell silent as everyone realized what that meant. Torres spoke up. "What about the emergency shuttles? Can we evacuate?" "Not in this storm," another miner said. "We would crash before we got 100 meters. We are trapped here." Lyria listened to all of this with growing fear. She looked down at Ember and Ash. The dragons were shivering despite the warmth they naturally produced. Then suddenly, an idea struck her. She remembered something her grandmother had told her long ago. Dragons were creatures of fire and heat. Even as babies, they could survive in the coldest places because their bodies generated incredible warmth. That was how they kept their eggs. Safe in frozen caves, Lyria pushed through the crowd until she reached Hayes. "I think I can help," she said. Hayes looked at her with surprise. "How the dragons," Lyria explained quickly. "They produce heat, a lot of heat. If we put them near the generator, maybe their warmth could help thaw it faster." Director Cole overheard and turned to face them. "That is insane," she said. "Those animals are too small to make any difference." Lyria stood her ground. "You are wrong. Baby dragons generate enough heat to melt ice in seconds. I have seen it myself. Cole looked skeptical but desperate. Even if that is true, how would we get them to the generator? The engineering section has no heat at all. They would freeze before they could help. I will go with them, Lyria said. I will protect them. Hayes stepped forward, and I will go too. We do not have time to argue about this. Cole stared at them for a long moment, then she nodded. Fine, but if this does not work, we are all dead anyway. So you better be right. Hayes grabbed thermal suits and breathing masks for herself and Lyria. The engineering section was on the far side of the outpost. To get there, they would have to go through corridors that were already freezing. Torres and 2 other miners volunteered to come along. They carried tools and emergency equipment. The group moved quickly through the dark hallways. The temperature dropped with every step. Lyria's breath came out in thick white clouds. Ice was forming on the walls and floor. Ember and Ash stayed close to her. Their scales were starting to glow faintly as their bodies reacted to the cold. That is a good sign, Lyria told Hayes. When dragons glow, it means they are producing maximum heat. They reached the engineering section and found it in chaos. The main generator was a massive machine covered in thick ice. Engineers stood around it looking helpless. Their tools were useless against the layers of frozen water. Hayes explained the plan quickly. We need to position the dragons as close to the generator core as possible. The chief engineer, a burly man named Phillips, looked doubtful. You want to use baby lizards to save a 1,000,000 credit machine? He shook his head. This is crazy. Just try it. Torres said. What do we have to lose? Phillips sighed. Fine. But if they break something, I am blaming all of you. Lyria carried Ember to the generator core. Hayes carried Ash. They placed the dragons on a metal platform right next to the frozen machinery. At first nothing happened. The dragons just looked around confused. Then Ember seemed to understand. He pressed his small body against the ice and his scales began to glow brighter. Ash followed his brother's example. Both dragons started making a low humming sound. Heat radiated from them in waves. The ice on the generator began to melt. Water dripped onto the floor, forming puddles. The engineers watched in amazement. It is working. Phillips breathed. Keep them there. Keep them right there. More ice melted away. Steam rose from the generator as metal surfaces emerged from their frozen prison. The dragons glowed brighter and brighter, until they looked like small suns. Lyria stayed close, murmuring encouragement to them. You are doing so well, she said. Just a little longer. Minutes passed like hours. The engineering team worked frantically to clear away melted ice and restart systems. Finally, Phillips shouted, I've got power, partial power, but it is something. He threw switches and pressed buttons. Throughout the outpost, lights began to flicker back on. The heating system rumbled to life. Warm air started flowing through the vents. A cheer went up from the engineers. Hayes grabbed Lyria in a tight hug. You did it, she said. They did it. Lyria felt tears on her cheeks. She picked up Ember and Ash, who were tired but happy. The dragons chirped proudly, as if they knew they had done something important. Word of what happened spread through the outpost within minutes. When Lyria and Hayes returned to the central shelter, everyone stared at them. Director Cole approached with an expression Lyria could not read. You saved us, she said simply. Those dragons saved 73 lives today. She looked at Ember and Ash with new respect. I was wrong about them. And I was wrong about you. Lyria did not know what to say. Cole turned to address the gathered miners. New rule, she announced. The elf and her dragons are welcome, here for as long as they want to stay. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Miners came forward to thank Lyria and to gently pet the tired dragons. Katie brought fresh meat for Ember and Ashrivera brought warm blankets. Even Torres smiled and admitted, I guess I was wrong about them being dangerous. They are heroes. Hayes stood beside Lyria watching the celebration, so she said, I guess you are staying. Lyria looked around at all the smiling faces. She thought about how terrified she had been just yesterday. Now she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt safe. Over the following weeks, Lyria discovered that life in a human mining outpost was nothing like she had imagined. The miners worked long, hard shifts digging valuable minerals from deep underground, but when they were off duty, they were friendly, funny, and surprisingly gentle. Torres taught Ember how to play fetch with a metal ball. The dragon loved the game and would bring the ball back over and over until Torres was too tired to throw anymore. Katie started a betting pool on how fast Ash could run. The dragon enjoyed showing off and would race across the outpost common area, while miners cheered. Rivera gave Lyria books about dragon biology, and together they studied how to best care for growing hatchlings. Hayes became Lyria's closest friend every evening. They would sit together in the observation lounge watching the sunset paint the frozen mountains in shades of pink and gold. Hayes told stories about her childhood on Earth. Lyria shared tales of life on Silver Grove. They discovered they had more in common than either expected. Both had lost parents young. Both had chosen difficult paths that their families did not understand. Both believed that doing the right thing mattered more than following rules. The dragons grew quickly with proper food and care. Within a month, Ember was the size of a large dog. Ash was slightly smaller but faster and more clever. Their scales grew brighter and their wings began to develop properly. Soon they would be able to fly. Director Cole kept her word about letting them stay. But she also put Lyria to work. You cannot just sit around, she said. Everyone here earns their keep. Lyria was assigned to help with outpost maintenance. She learned how to repair heating systems, check air filters, and maintain the computer networks. The work was hard but satisfying. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. One morning, Hayes came to find her with an excited expression. I have got an idea, she said. Lyria looked up from the panel she was repairing. What kind of idea? Hayes grinned. A way to make you and the dragons officially useful? Come with me. She led Lyria to Director Cole's office, where Phillips, the chief engineer, was already waiting. Cole sat behind her desk, looking serious as always. Hayes has proposed. Something interesting, she said. I want to hear your thoughts. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing maps of the surrounding mountains. This region has dangerous weather, she explained. Ships crash here regularly. Miners get lost in storms. Rescue operations are difficult because our shuttles cannot fly in high winds. She turned to Lyria, but dragons can fly in any weather, and they can find people using their heat sense. If we trained Ember and Ash for search and rescue, they could save lives. Phillips nodded enthusiastically. It is brilliant. Dragons are perfect for this environment. They do not need fuel and they do not freeze. Plus, they are small enough to land in tight spaces. Cole leaned back in her chair. This would make us the only outpost in the sector with dragon rescue capability. That could be valuable. She looked at Lyria. What do you think? Can they be trained? Lyria thought carefully. Yes, she said. Dragons are intelligent and loyal. If they bond with a handler, they will do anything to protect their team, but it will take time and patience. Cole nodded. Then you are officially our dragon handler. Hayes will assist you. You both have 6 months to get them ready. After that, we will run a test mission. Lyria felt a surge of excitement. She had never trained dragons before, but she knew the basics from her grandmother's teachings. This was her chance to prove that she and the dragons truly belonged here. The training began the next day. Hayes had cleared out an old storage building to use as a practice space. She set up obstacle courses and simulation equipment. Lyria started with simple commands. Sit, stay, come. Ember learned quickly, always eager to please. Ash was more independent and sometimes ignored commands if he was not in the mood, but both dragons clearly understood what Lyria wanted. After a week, they moved on to more complex skills. Lyria taught them to search for hidden objects using their heat sense. She taught them to carry supplies in specially designed harnesses. She taught them to land precisely in marked zones. Hayes worked on her own skills too. She studied dragon behavior and learned their body language. She practiced giving backup commands in case Lyria was injured. She designed safety equipment that would protect both dragons and humans during rescue missions. The miners often came to watch the training sessions. They cheered when the dragons succeeded and groaned when they failed. Some of them started making bets on training milestones. Torres started a chart tracking the dragon's progress. 2 months into training, Lyria noticed something interesting. The dragons were not just learning commands. They were learning to care about the humans around them. When Katie fell and hurt her ankle, Ash refused to leave her side until Rivera arrived. When Phillips was working late one night, Ember brought him a blanket in his mouth. The dragons were becoming part of the community. One evening, a real emergency gave them their first chance to help. A miner named Linda had gone out to check some equipment and had not returned. The storm was too rough for shuttles to search. Director Cole called Lyria to her office. "Can they do it?" she asked. "Can they find her in the dark?" Lyria looked at Ember and Ash. Both dragons seemed to understand the seriousness of the moment. "They can try," she said. Hayes grabbed their rescue gear. Lyria fitted the dragons with harnesses that had lights and communication equipment. The team headed out into the storm. The wind was brutal, and visibility was nearly zero, but Ember and Ash moved confidently through the snow. They could sense heat sources that human equipment could not detect. After 20 minutes of searching, Ash suddenly stopped and barked. He had found something. Lyria and Hayes rushed over. Linda was huddled behind a rock, unconscious from the cold. Her equipment had failed and she had gotten lost trying to return to base. Hayes checked her vital signs. "She is alive, but barely. We need to get her back now." Lyria looked at Ember. The dragon was big, enough now to carry a person. "Can you do this?" she asked him. Ember lowered himself to the ground. Hayes carefully placed Linda on his back, securing her with safety straps. Then Ember stood and began walking back toward the outpost, moving slowly to keep his passenger stable. Ash walked alongside, providing extra warmth back at the base. Rivera and her medical team were waiting. They rushed Linda into treatment as soon as Ember arrived. The dragon had carried her perfectly. Not a single scratch. Director Cole watched the whole thing. When Rivera finally came out and said Linda would fully recover, Cole turned to Lyria. "You and those dragons just saved a life," she said. "I think you are ready for official duty." News of the rescue spread beyond the outpost. Other mining settlements heard about the dragon team. Some were skeptical. Others were curious. A few even reached out asking if they could hire Lyria and the dragons for their own emergencies. Hayes showed Lyria the messages. "You are becoming famous?" She teased Lyria. "Felt overwhelmed. I just wanted to save 2 baby dragons," she said. "I never meant to start something this big." Hayes smiled. "That is how the best things usually start. Someone does something good without expecting anything in return. Then others see it and want to help too." She gestured around the outpost. "Look at this place." A few months ago, these people barely talked to each other. Now they work together. They care about each other. And a lot of that is because of you. Lyria shook her head. "It is because of the dragons. People see them and remember that even the smallest creatures can do great things." That night, Lyria sat with Ember and Ash in their sleeping area. The dragons were curled up together, tired from their successful rescue. She stroked their scales and thought about how far they had all come. A few months ago, she had been a lone elf trying to survive in a hostile world. Now she had friends. She had purpose. She had a home, and it was all thanks to humans. The very beings she had been taught to fear. Maybe her grandmother had been right when she said that every species has good and bad in them. The trick was not to judge everyone by the worst examples. It was to look for the best in people and give them a chance to prove themselves. Outside the window, the stars were shining bright in the clear night sky. The storm had finally passed. Somewhere out there, other elves were living according to the old ways, avoiding humans and keeping to themselves. Lyria wondered what they would think if they could see her now living with humans, working with humans, trusting humans. They would probably say she had lost her mind. But Lyria knew the truth. She had not lost anything. She had found something precious. She had found proof that different species could work together, that old fears could be overcome, that kindness mattered more than prejudice, and that sometimes the most unlikely friendships were the strongest ones. 6 months after the first rescue mission, Lyria and her dragon team had become legendary across the mining sector. They had saved 47 lives. They had recovered valuable equipment worth millions. They had proven that cooperation between species was not just possible but powerful. Other outposts now requested their help regularly. Director Cole had turned it into a profitable service. Half the money went to maintaining the outpost. The other half was split among the rescue team. Lyria had more credits in her account than she had ever seen in her life. But money was not what made her happy. What made her happy was the work. Every time she flew out on Ember's back with Ash soaring alongside them, she felt truly alive. Every time they brought someone home safe, she knew she was doing something that mattered. Hayes had become an expert dragon handler in her own right. She could read the dragon's moods as well as Lyria could. She knew when they were tired or stressed. She knew when they needed extra food or rest together. The two women made a perfect team one morning. They received an unusual call. It came from the planetary governor's office on the main settlement far to the south. Director Cole listened to the message, then called Lyria and Hayes to her office. "We have got a situation," she said. "A transport ship crashed in the northern wastes 3 days ago. 20 people on board, including the governor's daughter. Regular rescue teams cannot reach them because of the terrain." She looked at Lyria. "They are asking for you." Lyria felt her stomach tighten. The northern wastes were the most dangerous region on the planet. Temperatures there dropped to levels that could kill in minutes. Even dragons struggled in that kind of cold. Can Ember and Ash handle it? Hayes asked. "I do not know," Lyria admitted. "They have never been tested in conditions that extreme. But if there are people dying, we have to try." Cole nodded. "The governor is offering a huge reward. But more importantly, this is a chance to show what you can really do. If you succeed, every outpost in the sector will want dragon rescue teams. This could change everything." Lyria looked at Hayes. "What do you think?" Hayes did not hesitate. "Those people need us. We go." They spent the next hour preparing. Rivera packed emergency medical supplies. Phillips loaded their equipment with extra heating units. Torres helped them plan the best route through the wastes. The whole outpost came out to see them off. Katie hugged Lyria tight. "Be careful," she said. "Come back safe." Lyria promised she would try. She climbed onto Ember's back while Hayes mounted Ash. The dragons spread their wings and launched into the sky. Flying was still the most amazing feeling Lyria had ever experienced. The wind rushed past her face. The world spread out below like a map. She could see for kilometers in every direction. They flew north following the coordinates Cole had given them. As they traveled, the landscape changed. The Rocky Mountains gave way to flat ice plains. The temperature dropped steadily. After 2 hours, Lyria could see the crash site ahead. The transport ship had come down hard. It was half buried in snow with one wing torn, completely off. Debris was scattered across the ice. Ember and Ash landed near the wreckage. Lyria and Hayes dismounted carefully. The cold was brutal even through their thermal suits. They approached the ship and banged on the hull. "Anyone in there?" Lyria shouted. A muffled voice responded. "We are here. 20 of us. Please help." Hayes found the emergency hatch and pried it open inside. The ship was dark and freezing. The survivors huddled together for warmth. They looked terrible. Frostbite, injuries, pure exhaustion written on every face. A young woman pushed to the front. "I am Governor Chen's daughter," she said. "My name is Nicole." "Thank you for coming." Lyria assessed the situation quickly. "We cannot take everyone at once," she said. "The dragons can carry maybe 6 people per trip. We will need to make multiple runs. That will take hours." Hayes said, "Some of these people do not have hours. Then we work fast," Lyria replied. They began loading the most injured survivors onto the dragons. Ember could carry 3 people secured to his harness. Ash could carry 2 plus Hayes, who would guide them back. Lyria would stay with the remaining survivors and keep them alive until the dragons returned. As Ember and Ash took off with the first group, Lyria turned to those who remained. "We need to stay warm," she said. Everyone moved to the center of the ship-share body. Heat. Nicole helped organize people. Despite being a governor's daughter, she did not act spoiled or helpless. She tore up seat cushions to make insulation. She rationed out the remaining food and water. She kept people talking to prevent them from falling asleep. Hours passed slowly. Lyria used her emergency beacon to stay in contact with Hayes. The first group made it back safe. Ember and Ash were returning for the second run. The dragons arrived exhausted but determined. They took 5 more survivors this time, pushing their limits. That left 9 people, including Lyria and Nicole. The third trip would be the last, but when Ember and Ash returned for the final run, Lyria noticed something wrong. Ash was limping. "What happened?" she asked Hayes over the radio. He pulled a muscle in his hind leg. Hayes replied he can still fly, but not with passengers. "It is too risky," Lyria did. The math Ember could take 6 people maximum. That left 3 who would have to wait for another rescue team. There was no way another team could arrive before nightfall, and nightfall in the northern wastes meant certain death. She made a decision: load 6 people onto Ember, she ordered. "I will stay behind with 2 others. Hayes protested immediately. "No, we are not leaving you. We will figure something else out." "There is no other way," Lyria said firmly. "Ember cannot carry more than 6 safely, and Ash is injured." She looked at Nicole and the other survivors. "Who wants to volunteer to stay with me?" 2 miners stepped forward without hesitation, a woman named Grace and a man named Marcus. "We will." "Wait," Grace said simply. "Someone has to." Lyria helped secure the 6 survivors onto Ember. The dragon looked at her with worried eyes, as if he knew what she was planning. "I will be okay," she told him. "Just get them home." Go Ember launched into the sky. One last time Lyria watched until he disappeared into the distance. Then she turned to Grace and Marcus. "We have maybe 4 hours until dark," she said. "We need to build shelter and conserve body heat." They worked together using debris from the ship to create a small protected space. They shared the last of the thermal blankets. They huddled close as the temperature continued to drop. Grace was a veteran miner who had worked on a dozen different planets. Marcus was younger, but tough and optimistic. "We are going to make it," he kept saying. "They always come back for people." Always night fell and the cold became unbearable. Lyria could barely feel her fingers and toes. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. Beside her, Grace and Marcus were fading too. She thought about Hayes and the dragons, about the outpost that had become her home, about all the people she had saved. If this was her end, at least it had been a good life. But she was not ready to give up yet. Then through the darkness, she heard something. A familiar sound: wings beating against the wind. She looked up and saw 2 shapes descending from the sky, Ember and Ash. But how they should have been resting back at the outpost. The dragons landed and Hayes jumped down. She looked furious and relieved at the same time. "Did you really think I would leave you here?" she demanded. "Did you really think we would not come back?" Lyria started crying. "You came." "Of course we came," Hayes said. "You are family. Family does not leave each other behind." They loaded Grace and Marcus onto the dragons. Then Lyria climbed onto Ember's back for the last time. The flight home was the longest of her life, but when she finally saw the lights of the outpost ahead, she knew she had made it. They landed to a crowd of cheering miners. Director Cole stood at the front, with an expression of pure relief. "You gave me a heart attack," she said. "Do not ever do that again." Nicole, the governor's daughter, stepped forward. She had been treated and looked much better. "My father wants to meet you," she said to Lyria. "He wants to thank you personally for saving everyone. But more than that, the Planetary Council wants to establish an official Dragon Rescue Corps, with you as the commander." Lyria looked at Hayes in shock. "A whole organization?" she whispered. Hayes grinned. "You started something amazing. Now it is time to see how big it can become." Over the following months, the Dragon Rescue Corps grew rapidly. Other elves heard about Lyria's success and came to join humans who loved animals, signed up to be handlers. Scientists studied dragon biology to improve training methods. Engineers designed better equipment. The original outpost became a training center. Lyria and Hayes taught new teams everything they had learned. Ember and Ash became the example that all other dragons were measured against. One evening, Lyria stood on the observation deck watching young dragons practice flight maneuvers. Hayes joined her with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Thinking about the old days?" Hayes asked. Lyria nodded. "Sometimes I cannot believe how much has changed. I came here expecting to die in the cold. Instead I found a home." Hayes smiled. "You know what I think? I think you were meant to find those dragon babies. I think you were meant to come here. Everything happened for a reason." Lyria considered this. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe we just make the best of the chances we get. Either way, I am grateful." She raised her cup to second chances, to unlikely friendships, and to baby dragons who saved the world. Haze clinked her cup against Lyria's, and to humans and elves proving that we are better together than apart. They drank and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The dragons flew overhead, their scales gleaming in the fading light. And Lyria knew that no matter what happened next, she would always remember. This